Hello and welcome to lesson 4, and in this particular lesson we will learn about arrays and vectors. So first of all, let's include our input output stream so we can print some stuff out for the user and also get some stuff from the user input. Then we say that we want to use the namespace functions inside std, and then we will say that our int will be a basic function, our main will be a basic function which will return null, and let's say arrays and vectors is our first line. Then in the line there, and just let me see if this works fine. Yes, okay. So we are talking about arrays, and basically the basic C++ or C star arrays doesn't require libraries like array or vector library or list or even initializer list or something like this. You can just basically declare anything, any kind of array. Let's start with an int array, int my int array, and then you give it some size, let's say 2 elements, and then you can even initialize this to 0.0 and sorry, 0 and 1. It's integer array, I keep confusing with doubles, right? So this is our first array. You can even put my array and give it empty bracket and just use initializer, say for example 0 1 2 43 4 2 blah blah blah, and the compiler will read how many elements there are and automatically guess the size of the array. You can even declare a two-dimensional array. So my 2D array will be something like, let's say, 2 by 2 array, and we fill it up. My 2D array 0 and 0. This is the first row, first column, or we can say 0th row, 0th column, C++ style. So let's say this will be a 0, then just copy paste this 3 more times because we know there will be a total of 4 elements. So 0 1 is equal to 1, and 1 0 is equal to 2, and 1 1 is equal to 3. So this will be the lower corner of our matrix, 2 by 2 matrix. This will be also, let's say this will be lower right corner when we print it, lower right, lower left corner, right? So we want to print this guy, we have to write a function. So let's declare a function void print array 2D, and then we take an integer array this time, so my 2D array, and we say some size 2 by 2, right? And also we can ask the user to put a size as well. Okay, so that's the function declaration, and now we go to the function definition, and we are going to say for int I is equal to 0 and I is less than the size. Because it's a square matrix, both I and j are equal, that's why I'm only taking one size. So let's change this to j now, j++. Right, so here's our loop that's going to print the array, and we can say my cout my 2D array at ith row and jth column, and give space in between each successive between successive elements, right? And then end the line there. So what's happening here is how it works is, so initially it goes to the 0th row, the 0th row, and then it iterates through all of the columns there. So you finish row by row, which is why I'm giving so spaces between each element. once every row is being printed, I'm saying go to a new line, basically end the line that was uh, holding all these elements, and then this is the way you can print out a square matrix. Of course it's not going to work because I have some strays here and I haven't called this function yet, right? So let's call this function print array 2D, and our array is my 2D array and size is 2, right? Let's hope that this works. And yeah, so we said that 3 should be the lower right corner and 2 should be the lower left corner, and so that way we understand that this is the 0th row 0th column, 0th row first column, and then it moves on to the next line where we said end the line there, see out end line, and then it prints out first row 0th column, first row first column. So spend some time, make some bigger arrays and try to print it out and see how C++ iterates through the rows and the columns. Alright, so now we move on to vectors. So I'm gonna comment out this entire thing of arrays because I don't want to use them anymore. And also this function. Right, so let me just put some space in there, and okay. So to use vectors, we need to include the library header file vector. And vector is actually inside std again, just like stdcr, scene, cr, and string. Vector is also inside the namespace std. So therefore, including this using namespace std one time was enough to access all these functions. Am I right? So now we can declare vectors. Alright, so first thing you can do, let's declare an integer vector. So vector of integers, my int vec. Now this time I didn't actually use any kind of sizes, or just declaring that this is going to be a vector, right? My int vec. Okay, so vector int my int vec 2. This time I'm going to give it a size. So here, let's say no size given. Here, size given but not initialized, right? So one useful thing when dealing with vectors is that you can actually even initialize it to some value, right? So if I say 3 elements and initialize with 0, now here size is given and initialized, right? So that's very useful. Most of the times, especially in the programming that you're going to write or use, I have initialized most of the vectors to value of 0.0, but those were doubles. So how do we declare a double vector? So vector double, right? So my double vec, let's say 10 elements of initialized to 0.0, right? And we can also declare vector double, but it will be a vector of vector double. So it's a two-dimensional array, and you guessed it right, if you put this inside this another vector double, then it will be a three-dimensional array, right? But we are going to stick with two-dimensional, my 2D vec, and you can say for example 10 elements, and you need to write a single dimension or one-dimensional vector again to initialize this, say 10 and then 0.0, right? So basically you are saying 10 rows and then fill it up with columns of vector doubles of size 10 and initialize all the elements with 0.0. So if you imagine, just like say for instance 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 and 10. Well, technically it should be starting from the 0th element. Yeah, so when I wrote this part 10, it created this 0 to 9. But when I said it should be filled with vector double of 10 elements with 0.0, then it automatically fills up this with, well, I'm just giving here the index, not actually the value. If I'm going to use the value, it will be 0.0 everywhere. I'm just giving the index. Nevertheless, I will fill it with 0.0 just to make things clear, right? So yeah, again, let's start. When I said create 10, it created 10 rows for me, and then I'm saying fill it with 10 in columns, or maybe one-dimensional vector of 10 elements. Then obviously it has to go in the other dimension, and it starts filling up with size up to 10 elements. If I say it here, fill it up with 3, then of course it's going to stop somewhere here, right? Something like that. So that's how it works. Okay, and if I said here 1.0, then all of this will be replaced with 1.0. Alright, so we are saying 10 rows and then vector, fill it up with vector of size 10 columns and initialize all the elements to size 0.0, not size, value 0.0. Right, so that's a two-dimensional vector. Now let's say I declared this vector my double vec, and I'm declaring it to the size 10. I can even, after I declare it, I can resize it. So I can actually, if at some point I wanted to change this, then I can resize it, but we'll come to that in a bit. First, let's write a print function, void print vec 2D. Should we print 2D or maybe 1D vec? Yeah, 1D. And then it takes a vector double, let's call it vec, as the argument. Now we need to write this. It's going to be quite simple to write. So for in size type, instead of using integer, I'm using size type. I equal to 0, I is less than. This time we don't need to pass in the size of this vector because it already comes with these functions which can guess the size. So vec dot size I plus plus, and then we say cout vec at I. Right, let's try to print this guy. Okay, so we call this function, what's the name? Print vec 1D, print vec 1D, and we print my double vec. Right, let's build first before running. Oh, okay, vector. Right, sometimes some compilers require space here, so vector of vector double, then. Right, so because these two nested brackets, angle brackets, were just, before it was sitting like this, just next to each other. Sometimes it's okay, sometimes they require you to put a space there, so it should be fine. So let's run now. So this is our vector of 10 elements, right? Pretty easy to actually use, rather than using arrays and filling it up manually. You can just initialize some vector to a size. Let's say I wanted to use this this time with 5 elements, and then run again. Right, and also if I want to change the initial value, I can do that too. Right, and I can also use the similar to arrays. I can also use my double vec and the square bracket to modify a particular element. So third element will be 1.25, something like this. Of course, this will only work on depending on how you order it. Here, if I put this guy before declaration, well, of course you can't put it, but whatever comes latest will be the element that's going to be filled up. Okay, so let's see. Now we are saying initialize to 1.0, but the third element should be, well, when I say third, 0, 1, 2, 3, so the fourth element should be 1.25. Yeah, so that worked just fine. Now I can also use some other functions like my double vec. There's so many functions inside here: assign, bec, cn, data, a lot of functions. And let's try to resize this. So resize, now it contains 5 elements. Let's resize to a bec again to 10 elements and see what happens now. Now notice that I didn't tell the software or the programming to fill it up with zeros, but whenever a vector is declared of doubles, it automatically fills it up with zeros. So we have here the first 5 elements are from 1.0, what we used, and also the fourth element is what we modified, and the next 5 elements we put because we resized from 5 to 10. Now we have 5 more zeros here. Right, so you can resize your vector at any point. You can also find out the size of the vector. So see out size of my vector, and this is particularly useful because sometimes you are given a vector from somewhere and then you just need to know what size it is. Okay, so my 2D vec dot size, and then let's see now. Right, so size of my vector 10. Alright, so let's stop printing this guy. There's a couple more things that you need to take care of, which is, for instance, if you have a two-dimensional vector, then you can't just use size of my vector. You need size I and size j, right? So how to find that, especially if they are not square matrices or square vectors, but they are more like rectangular and have more rows than columns or more columns than rows or something similar like that. So we can do myvec 2d.size and also my 2d vec 0.size. Right, this should, I think, work fine. Just 10 and 10, give some space in between there. So let's say, let's give it a tab spacing just to remember ourselves what we did in the first lesson. So, and let's try to modify this guy this time to 10 and 5. So hopefully it works. Right, so now it's saying it's got 10 in I direction and 5 in j direction, size I, size j. Right, so that's how you get the sizes in columns and in terms of rows and columns. Okay, so that's particularly useful as well. One other thing that you can is useful is a function called reserve. Let's say, for example, you are loading from a file a big list of, let's say, cell nodes, but you don't know how many. However, as a programmer, you will decide maximum nodes will be 5,000 or something. Yeah, so that's your capability of your program, and therefore one thing you can do is just reserve some space, let's say 5,000 spaces, and then once you actually know the size and you're vector is filled up, then you can resize my 2D vector resize back to the space that you want. Let's say it only the grid or the node list was really small and it only required 100 spaces. Then later on you can resize the vector to the amount of nodes you need. Okay, so I hope that this was helpful in terms of arrays and vectors, and hopefully in the next lesson we will learn a bit about classes and maybe even template classes, and also namespaces and type deduction. Right? Thank you.